All right, welcome back to another episode of Buzz Beat. This is Brian Geisinger. I'll be joined by my colleague, my co-host Darian, for another episode. Richie Randall, as usual, is on the ones and twos producing. We thank you for joining us wherever you are, whether you're listening live or checking out the pod or pods, depending on how this gets chopped up later in the week. It's hard to believe it's June. School's almost out. I guess college has been out for a few weeks now. Summer school's going on. Yeah, it's crazy. Draft's only a few weeks away. Darian, and then free agency not too long after that. Darian, before we talk a couple of few more scouting reports on this pod and get into some general Hornets talk, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I feel like, after the season, you get this lull of, the Hornets sucked again. But then you kind of get towards this like ladder playoffs, and you're kind of like enjoying just being able to watch basketball, not really having to think about your team too much. But as you mentioned, draft coming up, free agency coming up, so therefore the Hornets are ramping up. So I'm excited, but it's good to just enjoy basketball for what it is sometimes.
Yeah, had a few weeks to digest Charlotte, controlling the number 6 pick in the first round of the 2024 draft. Playoffs have been fun, at least in the Western Conference. I guess there was some drama, sort of like diet drama in the Eastern Conference Finals with Boston and Indiana. A couple of close games, but never really felt like it was in doubt for the C's all that much. I'm excited for the finals. I have no clue who's going to win. I just hope it's a long series. We get some good games. If Dallas wins, my guess, I'm willing to put a bet on this now. We get another PJ Washington post-game Instagram live making fun of the Hornets. Feels like a safe bet to have. Hey, man, he got out and he's played great for Dallas. I don't know. I've taken some victory laps on this already, but I believed in PJ as a guy that could really contribute in a postseason setting, and he's been crucial. And very cool to see Derek Lively, a guy I covered at Duke last season, playing unbelievable basketball for Dallas. Glad the head neck injury that he suffered in Game 3 against Minnesota, wasn't too bad. But we're here to talk draft, and I feel like, Darian, while we've been going through these scouting pods, I feel like a lot of the buzzwords we've used have been shot maker or shooter or catch and shoot, or we've talked defensive versatility. We've talked like those types of things, the Steph Castles, the Zachary Richaches of the world. Some very fun names to kick around. Ron Holland, Matas Buzelis. Like we've covered a lot of ground here. But now we're kind of going to get to the part of the draft where we talk about some of the sort of like higher end on ball creators. There's not like a ton of that in the draft this year, which is probably one of the reasons why overall people are, sort of down on it. But we're going to talk Rob Dillingham of Kentucky and Nikola Topić of Red Star in the Adriatic League. So looking forward to get into this. And we're going to first start off with Dillingham. Absolutely one of the most electric fun players to watch in college basketball this season. One and done at Kentucky, was initially committed to NC State, and then decommitted late towards the end of the year in 2021. Would have been fun to have watched him in Raleigh this year, but it seems like he made a pretty good choice. Really came off the bench mostly for Kentucky. Like he and Reed Shepherd, ridiculous talents. Feels like both those guys are, locks to be top 5-6 picks. They were coming off the bench for Kentucky. 6'2", 175-pound guard. Very skinny, very thin frame, and certainly that's one of the places where it starts from. Like his detractions can get overpowered one-on-one guarding ball screens. Or guarding one-on-one or guarding ball screens. He's going to need to get stronger, but athletically, starting there, quick hands, overall just quick, incredibly twitchy player. So from an athletic standpoint, there is, I think, some stuff to like: the body control, the movement, the quick twitch, the quick hands. but certainly this is a guy that's gonna have to never he's never gonna be a fire hydrant out there defensively, but we'll need to get a little bit stronger. And you can see again, just from like the general lack of size. Again, we're gonna talk Dillingham and Topić today, and Topić is much bigger than Dillingham. So overall, just sort of like very general thoughts on Dillingham, just his play, and his sort of where he is from a physicality standpoint.
His play, I think an electric player. It's something that you're gonna say a lot about a lot of those kind of guys, particularly the guys I'm about to name all went to Kentucky, but they don't all are from Kentucky. But like the Tyrese Maxeys, the Malik Monks, those type of guys that can kind of well, for Monk, yeah, he used to come off the bench, and even for the Hornets, he would like specifically against the Heat, he would drop 30. Rob Dillingham has that type of potential, though I think he's a better playmaker than given credit for. And I think towards the end of the season, that's when it really started to pick up. But he always shows signs that he's decent. I think he needs to work on the accuracy a little bit. But as far as like his reads, I think they're pretty good. But really, he's a one-man show. Take that how you may. As far as his game, I'm not saying that he's someone that is selfish or anything like that, though he takes crazy shots, but what 19-year-old doesn't when you can shoot it like that? But yeah, overall, he's an electric player. His stature is concerning. I think that's one of the reasons he's not higher. Being 6'1", being as skinny as he is, 180 pounds, 75 pounds, something like that. So he's fairly light. I mean, luckily for him, nothing in his game really requires him to what you draft Rob Dillingham for. His weight isn't going to be a factor in that. I think you take that, it comes with the territory. Of course, you would like for him to gain more weight and, maybe get an inch or two taller somehow. But I don't think that you're drafting him with those. I think you're already aware of those concerns. You're really just getting him for the offense. So depending on your team, depending on who you have around him, it may not come into a factor. If you're trying to get well-rounded player, I can see why some people have him falling, down more and more on draft boards. I don't think it's a talent thing. I think it's just more of his size. And we talked about Reed Sheppard. Rob Dillingham is so small. It's almost impossible to even hide him. At least Reed Sheppard, I feel like you could get away with a couple of things depending on your personnel. But Rob Dillingham, you could have the 4 best defenders of the league, and they're going to hunt Dillingham until they can't anymore.
He's going to have a target on his back from the jump, and that might be something that he carries with him throughout his career. Again, maybe he gets stronger, the hand quickness. Maybe he becomes a guy that can at least be feisty against guards and be in gaps, as a help defender, that type of stuff. But you said the word talent. It's with him, it's pretty like undeniable. You watch him start dribbling a basketball, and his wiggle, the change of direction, the creativity with both the handle, the passing. He's got a lot of different ways to attack top foot. If he's, trying to reject the screen and get downhill or go at you one-on-one, little spin out moves, crossover, hesitation. Like he's got a lot of tricks in his bag. Absolute demon with drag ball screens, and in general, just like a pretty impressive like open floor passer. He's a guy that really gets you going in transition. He's going to amp up your pace immediately in the pick and roll. Nice floater when he sees drop coverage. You can see the touch on his shot. Has the tendency, maybe I think, to settle at times. When he sees drop. It can also like sort of like short arm some floaters, but in general, like it's a good shot for him. Like I said, all the moves and wiggle he has to create separation, like an incredibly slippery player, impressive handle, and he doesn't need a ball screen to get downhill. Like he can self-create and just like in a blink, he's spinning around you in the other direction or crossing over and getting into a seam. Again, like I said, does a nice job pushing the ball. He can force transition or secondary offense. And even when that doesn't, directly lead to a bucket, it sort of like opens things up in the half court. You can flow into those early actions, your pistol actions, your drag ball screens. You can, stumble into random cross matches going that way. And Dillingham is the guy that can, I think, trigger a lot of that with his handle. Does feel like defenders can still bother him with length. And I think he's guilty at times of tunnel vision, driving into traffic, forcing opportunities, struggling with the bump, the physicality, and coughing it up. So even sort of despite the slipperiness that he has and some of the court mapping, just like sometimes he's a little limited from a playmaking and decision making standpoint. And in general, there's some like when to pass or when to shoot question marks I have with him. That said, he can spray the ball all over the floor as a passer. He takes chances. He throws into space with creativity and force. Has the Alondis Williams, line drive laser, kind of like on a rope skip passes. He can definitely take some gambles, but I'd kind of rather see that from a young guard. Like I want to see the manipulation, the creativity, the willingness to take risks, and then you live with some of the downside, at least at the moment. Because ultimately this guy's upside, his creation upside, that's the thing you're betting on. And it's why it feels like, for me, top 5, top 6 pick, really interesting young player. Be curious to see if San Antonio maybe looks at him at 4, or perhaps they look at Topić at 4, who we're going to get to in a few minutes. Any thoughts on Dillingham as an off-ball offensive player?
As an off-ball player, I think he's almost just as effective. I mean, a lot of things that we were talking about him on ball, I mean, that goes without saying. Those are what you're really going to see, in the highlights for sure. I remember specifically before he got to Kentucky, the overtime elite, he was like the talk of the town because he was just lighting those guys up. I don't remember his stat line, but I remember he was like dropped 30 like it was nothing. But off ball, I think he's just as effective. A lot of things that I just said actually about him getting hunted on defense, he kind of automatically creates a mismatch with him being off ball. I think him being small, being shifty, being able to change directions, all those things you mentioned, I think that allows him to kind of go around screens, though he may not need it. But he can just be isolated with someone, let's say in the corner, do a couple moves, and he's lost his guy, no screen involved, and can come up and hit a catch and shoot 3. So he's just, I think, as effective. Of course, I believe his best skill set requires him to have the ball. I don't think that's something you're going to look for taking the ball out of his hand. But as far as what he could do off ball, I mean, I really wouldn't be afraid to let him work off ball. And I think in being in the NBA with a little more spacing, I think that will really open up his game even more. He might take advantage of that. I have no doubt talent-wise, I would like to see kind of how he operates because he's so used to having the ball in his hand. But him being off ball, I think that's just going to really, like I said, open up his game. We might see some things that we didn't see at Kentucky. I think we do that every single year, whether someone from Kentucky's drafted in the top 5 or they're drafted in the latter top 50. You see something that they didn't do at Kentucky because there's so much going on. Now, granted, that Kentucky team wasn't as good as years past, but still, they had a lot of good players, and you're just not going to be able to see everything in college in general, but it usually just sticks out of Kentucky.
Yeah, he's I quite like his off-ball offense. And actually think it's like a pretty big strength of his. As far as like the jumper goes, shooting off movement, the form isn't always consistent. The base is like a little can be a little scatter shot. He lands awkwardly, will land on one leg at times, shooting off movement. Can still make some of those shots too, because the skill level is so crazy. But when the lower body is locked in, he can really be electric coming off screens. He can use screens or handoffs, flow into offense, quick catch and shoot 3s, or turn the corner and try to attack, drop coverage, or if you're up at the level or whatever, try to turn the corner on you. And again, just like his touch, his versatile shooting touch out of those possessions, I think really shines through as well. Dillingham this season shot 48%, just under 48% on catch and shoot 3s, according to Synergy. That's on 88 attempts. So nothing too crazy, but obviously very good number just as far as the sample, not enormous. And then 38% on off dribble jumper 3s. Both of these are very good numbers. There's just not like a ton of a sample you can't just look at that and say like, oh, this guy's obviously a world-class shooter, but there are some very good indicators just, looking at the numbers for him. 80% from the line, 44% on 3s. almost 50% on twos. So like again, these are indicators we're using to sort of evaluate skill, and they're all lighting pretty green for Dillingham. And then just like if you're thinking about him and out of handoffs or the pick and roll, again, we talked earlier about what he can do against drop coverage, the pull up shooting, the runners. He can be patient, look for a lob. If you give him a switch, then he can try to get into his bag and the handle and try to, isolate one-on-one in space against a larger, slower defender. And if you're up at the level, like he can skip past the defense right into rotation, So there's just a lot of stuff he can do at those mesh points with the skill level. And just again, sometimes it does look like effortless for him. Like he's just such a high skill player. The shooting, the passing, the court mapping, like there's a lot to like with him as an on-ball guy and a guy that's probably worth betting on, especially in this draft where there isn't a ton of that, top to bottom. Certainly understand the concerns, with him from the size and position standpoint. Who does he guard? What does that look like? Can he stay locked in at the point of attack guarding pick and roll? Like there's going to be stuff to really improve on and iron out on that end. But the offense stuff, it does feel like there's a bunch of different outcomes for this guy. One of them is maybe a starter player and a guy that has, some all-star potential. There's another pathway that he slides into the, Malik Monk, hyper six man, off the bench guy that you can play in hybrid lineups and close games with. And you just want his passing and his shot making out on the floor and his ability to attack different coverages and play off the ball. Like that is something he showed at Kentucky playing next to Reed Shepherd, DJ Wagner, Antonio Reeves, like other really good, high wattage guards that needed and played with the ball a lot too. And I think he was able to still find a role. If anything, there were some games he drifted or Kentucky didn't get him involved as much. So I'm a big fan of Dillingham. And again, the skill level, the offense, the upside as a creator is just something, even in, I think a normal draft is something to absolutely take note of. And, but the fact that this is a draft where we're a little uneasy in terms of just where can you find guys that have the ability to may have the ability to reliably initiate and create offense as, a primary guy, whether that is a starter or an ace guy coming off the bench. Dillingham is someone who probably has at least some equity in terms of guys for that in this class. So anything else on Kentucky freshman guard Rob Dillingham, a projected top 10 pick in the 2020 draft?
Real quickly, I just want to say that one thing I really like about him is that I personally feel like if you let him play his game, I don't really see an outcome where he necessarily is a bad player. I like how you mentioned that his upside is being this potential all-star type player or just a high voltage scorer. And then at worst, he is this Malik Monk who could get paid. We've seen all kind of numbers thrown out there early off season for us bad teams, but post regular season. And I just don't see, unless he's just not used correctly or he's put in a position where his defense is he's put on an island. I don't really see a pathway where he's really that bad of a player. He may not be the player you want him to, a full-fledged, all-around player, but his offense, he's so gifted. I think every time he brings the ball up the court, he has an opportunity to score or create points for your team. I think he sees everything as an opportunity, as you mentioned with drop coverage. He's able to kind of slide into defenders because he's so quick. He's just able to create offense out of anywhere, and he doesn't always need the ball in his hand, as you also mentioned. So I just really don't see that. He's one of the few guys in this draft where I do understand that, not every player is going to work out and that his physicality is what's kind of could lead to him not being a good player. But as far as talent-wise, I just don't see it. I don't see how he ends up being this guy that a team doesn't need in some capacity. Like I said, he may not be, you may look back at this draft and say, top 5, that might have been high for him, or maybe even top 7, that might have been high for him. But I don't think just early stages, I just don't really see, well, I guess late stages at this point, but I just don't really see a way where I'm looking at him in a couple of years saying, oh, this guy was, didn't do what I thought he was going to do. If he scores, that's it. I really can't expect anything else. And I think you have to come with that mindset if you are drafting him. If you're drafting him to do anything else, I think you're doing your team and him a disservice. But if you're aware of what he can do offensively and want to make the most of that, I think you're going to be very, very happy with what you get.
Yeah, agreed. Big time prospect. Excited to see where he lands. Not sure if he's going to be around when Charlotte picks at 6, but it wouldn't shock me. So certainly someone for the team to do some homework on. All right, let's flip it over. We're going to go across the pond here. We're headed to Serbia. We're headed to Belgrade specifically with Nikola Topić. Excuse me, 6'6" guard. Big playmaking guard, tall playmaker. Feels like he has a really projectable role into the NBA, even with the shot being maybe a little up and down, but just a guy with his ability to drive, his creativity, his use of angles, but a guy that should be able to take some, offensive creation workload at some point, and a guy that, and Topić, a prospect, I should say, that I could see making a lot of sense for Washington, for San Antonio. We'll see if you have San Antonio at 4 or I guess 8. But he's a guy that I would be interested for Charlotte to certainly consider as well, because his size, his ability to drive, the passing, it's all pretty damn compelling. And it should be noted, Topić, very young, only 18 years old. Rob Dillingham turned 19 back in January. Topić won't be 19 until August, and I believe he's one of the youngest guys in the 2024 draft field. Despite his youth, has been very productive when healthy on offense as an engine, scoring, driving, passing in the Adriatic League, mostly with predominantly with Mega, but he's had some nice moments when healthy and sort of a different role with Red Star this year. But yeah, when he got to play on the ball at Mega, I mean, he lit up the film in terms of his ability to create, his ability to drive. Topić is a guy that some of his film really, really pops when he's healthy, so feeling good, no knee injuries, the burst, the first step, his ability to quickly get downhill with a live dribble, to attack in either direction, left or right, to attack top foot, to beat guys one-on-one, to not even need a screen to get that done. Good flexibility, good ball control, can get into gaps, and he can finish through contact. And really good at, creating those angles around the hoop, can finish with either hand. And it's pretty funny when he decides to manipulate things a little bit. His ability to utilize deceleration and as a means of shedding defenders. And he's shown flashes of snaking ball screens. And when he plays with that kind of patience, and the defense is rotating around him in those middle pockets on the floor, and then in a snap he can hit the turbo button, get downhill and finish. And he's got, again, his moves around the rim. He's not like an above the rim guy, but his ability to contort, to finish around guys, to get guys off balance, and then to fade and finish. He's just got so many tricks in that final third of the floor to be a good finisher, and the numbers support that. He got to the rim a lot with Mega. He finished at a very high rate when he was playing there. And that downhill driving game, the finishing, the use of angles, the touch, it can really, he can collapse a defense and be a pretty impressive playmaker. So before we maybe talk a little bit, before I offer up thoughts on Topić with the shot or his defense or whatever, where are you with Topić, Darian? Mostly, let's focus first on his offense and maybe some of the production we've seen from him at a relatively early stage.
I'm actually really high on him. The question comes, am I high on him for the Hornets? And that's where I'm still kind of teetering the fence. And it's a lot of things. And unfortunately, very, very few of them have to do with actual like basketball as far as talent. So you got to think about LaMelo and his injury history. Topić has had, while not as significant, he has his own injury history, and seeing if they can play together, considering Topić is a little lackluster as a shooter. Not the thing is, his shot doesn't look bad, but it's also just not as high you would necessarily want it, considering this team needs a lot more shooting. But as far as offense, I think you hit the nail right on the head, because he is a very, very slippery ball handler. That you see, I think when the first time I watched him, I think it was like a 20-minute clip, if I'm not mistaken, of just offense. And at the end of the clip, I realized he didn't shoot, and because the way he attacks the rim is just so mesmerizing. I feel like the whole floor for some reason slows down for him. He just always seems like he knows what to do. He seems like he always knows where the players are. I've seen him, kind of kick it to the corner when he has two people crashing down on him. It's like, how do you even see that guy? I think he's really good at reading, understanding if, hey, this guy came to help, that means this guy's open. Wherever that guy may be, he already knows kind of where to hit it. And that may, could just be being, cool with the teammates or whatever, but it's just like his ability to read the floor, I think, is exceptional. If people who like him, who have him high, I know some people were, before his injury, his latest injury, maybe even a little before that, people were having him possibly go number one. I see it. He's just an incredible basketball player, very, very offensively gifted. While he's not going to light up the floor like we were talking about Rob Dillingham, he does it in other ways. He does it. He's definitely going to make your team better. And who doesn't want a player like that? And then you mentioned his size, being 6'6", and just being able to see the floor the way he does at such a young age. You wonder what that's going to look like in the future, because he can only get better. And I hate to say it like this, because people say this about basically every European guard, but he is just a very, very smart player. He knows what he can do, knows what he can't do, and I think he makes the most of his skill set. I think he's as far as being 18, 19 years old, I think he's optimized to the best of his ability what he's good at, and it shows.
Yeah, you can absolutely see the pathway for, I think, if he had been healthy this year, or if he just had maybe a slightly more fluid 3-point off the dribble shot, like, yeah, you could see the pathway for him being, the top prospect in this class. And I think he has a chance to be one of the best players once, sort of the dust settles, once we get 5-10 years out, these guys are, well into their career. It does feel like his ability just to be a kick-ass offensive player, like, it's right there, because his ability to get into the paint, and to finish with that size and to pass out of it is, 6'6" guys that are this young that can really like operate pick and roll and finish like this at the rim. They're not a ton of them at this stage of the game. And yeah, again, compare him to, we just talked about Rob Dillingham. I mean, Topić is 4 inches taller, probably has, 20, 25 pounds on him. And he's, 6-7 months younger, whatever. So like, he's got some size, and there's a frame to add muscle to, which is an important part. The shot is interesting. One of the games of his I watched recently, it was a playoff game against Mega, and he had a couple of threes where just some of the screen defenders went way under, and so he just had sort of like plenty of room to sort of like rhythm into it, take a pull up. And then there was another possession too where Red Star ran like a little Spain pick and roll action. He skipped it to the corner. Defense was in rotation. Ball swings back around. He got a wide open, spot up 3, kind of a line drive shot, but went in. I don't know. I do like, I mean, I'm a big fan of like guards who can get off the ball and then like relocate, play without it. And I think this year for him at, the limited time he's had with Red Star, he's shown the ability to get off the ball some, or to play without it. And we just talked about that as that being like a strength for Dillingham. And, as you're thinking about how these guys, Topić or Dillingham could maybe fit with Wembanyama in San Antonio, if those guys are, end up going to the Spurs at 4 or later in the draft. Like, I do think that those like off-ball moving components of their games could be like a really nice fit around around Wembanyama specifically. but yeah, I like his ability to attack. The first step, he's got like good bursts when healthy. It felt like when he came back from the knee injury, it wasn't quite he didn't have quite the same, zip. And that's probably a little bit of a concern, but that's why that's a concern for guys like you and I who are,
Yeah.
watching film, at our desks and stuff like that. But for teams, hopefully they're doing their due diligence, making sure that this was just him. Uh, these were, again, it was two knee injuries within the span of a couple of months. There's one in January and then one in May. So hopefully everything's okay. And hopefully, he can be healthy and ramp up and become a high pick and go into a good rookie season. So I even like, and again, this playoff game I'm watching against Mega, they're even running him off, little UCLA screens and throwing it to him in the post and sort of letting him operate from there too. So like you can do a lot of stuff with him because of his size and the passing and the ability to get to the paint. So really interesting offensive player. The defense, not great, really struggles to guard the ball. Like drives on him in space, it's too easy. You isolate against him on him in the mid post, and I mean, you or I might be able to do a little drop step score and just spin right off him for a layup. It gives it up a little too easily there. But because of the size, I think and because of some of the flashes as a team defender, I mean, he does feel like he could be a guy that gets targeted, in the next level. But if he has the kind of like creative, like if he's able to take on and excel with a large creation load, then like you can live with him maybe being like not the strongest one-on-one defender, as long as he's also giving you good team defense. And I think some of the rotations with his size as a helper, like he does enough there that you can feel reasonably confident about putting him into an NBA style defense, even if there are going to be some real concerns at times with him guarding the ball.
Yeah, that's where I know we've kind of really talked about him being with the Spurs, which, to be honest, I feel like really could say that for a lot of players, but really him and Dillingham, I think it really, really jumps out at you as far as good matches because of Wimby's skill set. But yeah, that's kind of where I believe it was the Ringer, and they're very early like playoff mock draft. They had him coming to the Charlotte Hornets. It was because it was before the draft lottery because we were still third. And he had Nikola Topić coming in as like the mellow ball insurance. And that's where it gets kind of tricky, specifically for us, because he doesn't play defense. And one thing I've always said about LaMelo, when healthy, he's an offense. For guys who can be an offense themselves, I don't really need you to play excellent defense. I think Topić in a way can kind of be an offense, but then that leaves us to our defense kind of strapped for cash, for lack of a better word, because then you have two guys who pretty good on offense, but just not really providing that much on defense. And I think the injuries have slowed him down a little bit. You would like to see kind of, especially his size, to get a little better. I don't know. It's just his positioning, I think, is really what just gives it off. And I think that's where he struggled. I really wouldn't count it as an effort thing. And I'm just big on, if you make mistakes on defense, but I see you giving an effort, I think it can be fixed with the right coaching staff. Of course, it's not going to happen right away, but I like the effort he does give. It's just like you said, he's just an easy target. The opposing players can really do whatever they want. And they usually get by him, and it's not like he's going to really contest a shot. So, that's really kind of just the biggest thing with his defense, is that at times you just wonder, is it even possible for him to play defense? And it's just that he just takes bad angles. And that's really it. But I think, the off chances he gets a steal here and there, he's able to create something from it. And I think that goes more so about his offensive abilities and his defensive abilities. So there's a path there. It's just not, I don't think it's something that is going to be easily discovered.
All fair. Big time talent, lots of upside. Again, very young. Will be 18 the night of the draft, which is crazy. So he's young. I think there's a pathway for him, but probably going to take some time, and he's going to need he's going to need health for him because the players are going to get everyone's athletic and physical, and yeah, it's tough. You brought up LaMelo Ball, so unless you have any other thoughts on Topić or Dillingham, I think it's cool for us to go ahead and turn the page over to the final topic for this week's pod. That's sort of focusing on the Hornets, specifically like the guys currently on the roster at the moment, and the guys who could be, on the roster 4 months from now when the season's getting ready to start, and could be on the roster maybe 4 years from now. But there was some chatter, as there often is at this time of the year. There's just, not that many games are taking place because of the playoffs. The draft is still a few weeks out. Stuff's getting leaked. People need to feed stuff into the content machine. But there were a couple of reports, I guess, tweets or whatever, alluding to, I believe, Evan Sidri, if I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He tweeted out a day or two ago, the Hornets are open to the idea of taking on non-desirable contracts in exchange for draft capital. And then Darian, I don't remember if it was you or Richie, sort of alerted us before the start of this that Gabe Plotkin, one of the owners of the Charlotte Hornets, he was on, I think it was the Gabe Grossman podcast, Standpoint with Gabe Grossman. They talked about a bunch of different stuff, and perhaps even discussed the possibility of the Hornets doing something along these lines. And maybe that's even where there's a chance that's where Evan is getting this report from. So that's I'm sort of like air quoting report a little bit there. Don't want to cross any wires here, but regardless, it's worth us using this as an opportunity to just sort of kick the can on this possibility versus the Hornets maybe taking some of the contracts they have, the surplus of, the mini surplus of picks they have, and maybe trying to get back to the playoffs for the first time since 2016 and try to build it up around LaMelo and Brandon Miller and Mark Williams and bring back Miles Bridges and do all this sort of stuff. So what I would just say, I'll give my quick 2 cents on this, and then we can kind of get into it from there. It would be surprising if they weren't open to the idea of this. And I know they've been very bad for almost a full decade now, but this is a new ownership. This is a new front office. This is a new coaching staff, and they're going to do things a little differently, at least from the previous regime. And which is to say that they're going to sort of like operate seemingly a little bit more like the way that a lot of small market teams would do in the situation that the Hornets are in, which is you have to build through the draft. As many picks as you can possibly have, the better. And one of the ways to acquire additional picks, obviously you can trade veteran players, Terry Rozier, PJ Washington, or you can harvest some of your cap space or potential cap space to take on money, whether it's maybe even like a little bit of long-term money in exchange for picks from teams that are looking to shed salary, maybe even add a player, and also, stay in a good position in terms of the tax. And the Hornets could be a team that could facilitate that and add new picks. I think it's smart for them to at least do their due diligence here. I certainly understand the frustration with people in the fan base or those in and around the team that just want to see them be competitive. But I think I've always, at every step along the way, as the Hornets have sort of like stumbled through this like win now, flip back into, rebuild, I've always preached patience and the need to, continue to tap into the draft, to continue to utilize your veteran players that are tradable or your cap space, or potential cap space, to add more picks or to add more young players, to get a Trey Man, right? Or to get a future first round pick from Dallas or Miami. Like it's not like genius level, basketball operations, but it is relatively shrewd, heady team building tactics for a small market team that like has good young players. The cupboard's not bare, but like it's not like plentiful in terms of like, amazing young players. And we barely got to see Mark Williams, LaMelo Ball, and Brandon Miller play together next season. I want to see more of that before you decide, yes, let's like go in on trying to get into the play-in tournament, or get the 8th seed or whatever and get into the playoffs. Because there's a chance that Charlotte, if they play the next year or two in sort of shrewd fashion, they could set themselves up to go to the playoffs a lot over the next 5 years or 6 years, even if that doesn't mean going to the playoffs next season, right? And so I would, and from a team build standpoint, I would offer up a little bit more patience from certain people. It's not even having to take the long view necessarily. Like it's slightly further out in the future. And this is one of the ways to help you in that process. And then though I've said this, I feel like every episode since like the season ended, Charlotte's first round pick, like for 2025, like is lottery protected with like, out the door to the Spurs.
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte should be trying to like make sure that it retains that pick. And because it's not conveyed as a first round pick this year, it turns into 2 second round picks. And one that could very well be a top 5 pick in what's set up to be a really good draft, which means they've got a chance to, maybe draft another, star level player potentially, or someone with star level upside. And so my thought would be, not only does this approach sort of allow you to maybe add, stuff to the cupboard, but it would also maybe improve the odds a little bit that you are going to retain that 2025 first round pick. Because once that's done, and losing 2 second round picks isn't nothing. But like once that's done, there's no like Charlotte has no other obligations, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as like first round picks that could be out the door. So they're whole there. And there's a good chance, it sort of depends on how things go with the Dallas and Miami trade, but like they've more than likely got 2 first round picks coming from those teams down the line too.
Right.
So like you keep your own, then you have this surplus of 2, and then you see what you actually have with LaMelo Ball, with Brandon Miller, with Mark Williams, and then whomever else they draft at 6, which there's like a lot of interesting players that are going to be in that range. So I need to see more of it. I need to see more of the young guys play together. I want the Hornets to do whatever it takes to make sure that they like manage these draft picks and either add or retain as many of them as they possibly can to kind of keep this thing stocked as they try to do a genuine, like thoughtful build around LaMelo and Brandon Miller. Thoughts from you?
No, I completely agree with everything you said. This is something where honestly, I would have been more surprised if they didn't take this approach. And I only say that because you see this with every kind of takeover, whether that's in sports, that's in real life, wherever you see takeovers, that you can apply it to corporate America. If you get a new like CFO, what they're going to do, they're going to get everybody who was there out before, bring in their own people from their own company or people they may know. It's just what happens. And it's not any different in the sports world. We see it happen. They just changed the whole front office, if I'm not mistaken. A majority of those people, of the key components of a front office, are gone, and they don't replace them already with other people who they think are very qualified. They completely wiped out the coaching staff and completely added new coaches. It's just a matter of time before it was the roster. And I mean, it's a lot of it is you can't do it yet. And then also they have to evaluate their players with all these new people. They have to take that time to kind of look at these guys and be like, all right, well, who, should stay, who should go. So even on that podcast that you were mentioning, Gabe Plotkin mentioned that they got a specific coaching staff in place because they wanted to develop young talent. That should tell you everything you need to know, because we have young players, but what have we seen from them? As fans, we're attached to some of these guys. We think they could be good, but how does the NBA see them? How does this new front office see them? I don't know. They didn't draft them. That's another thing we see, that there is no emotional attachment to any of these guys, including LaMelo Ball. In fact, I would say the only attachment they have to LaMelo is the contract itself. That's really it. I'm not saying they're going to trade LaMelo because that just wouldn't make any sense right now. But they don't have any attachment to anybody on this roster, including Mark Williams. Brandon Miller, I think Brandon Miller might be the only person they do have attachment to, because they're very high on him. And then we saw that they were kind of pulling the strings, or had advisors come in and kind of pull the strings around a little bit of what was done this season. And they're very, very high on Brandon Miller. So he might be the only person they have any type of real attachment to that's outside of monetary. But yeah,
it's just the money with the Melo is just, I mean, one, obviously the talent.
Yeah, and the fact that talent's undeniable.
And the fact that like the last 4 years it's revolved around him. But yeah, I mean, year one of rookie max extension, starting into place this year too. So he's going to be making upwards of $32 million this year. Mm-hmm. Far and away the most on the roster. So like that is just an undeniable part. And like I'm very happy for like LaMelo to still be part of the bill. I mean, maybe I don't know. There's been some other reports recently that have not been too great, I suppose, on with LaMelo, but his talent, his skill, like he's obviously a very talented young player. So I'm fine to have him here as like a piece for Charlotte, but I don't know. With all the young guys, I would just breed some caution, man. Everyone,
be
safe and careful, man. Like,
it's hard, man. Because like I'll give up one real quick. Like Nick Smith Jr., I actually really like his game, but it was just all over the place this year. And honestly, I wouldn't really give it all to his fault. There was some times where I thought, okay, you got to play better defense, or you need to be, a little more valuable on offense. But a lot of times it was. I think I talk about this all the time. The Denver game, he dropped like 16 in the fourth quarter, and they're like, "All right, now we're not going to play you for 2 months." And he comes back, shoots 1 for 9, and they're like, "Oh, why are you shooting 1 for 9?" It's like, well, he was on fire in a game. He almost, I wouldn't say he almost won us, but he kept us in that game by himself in that fourth quarter. And then they just didn't play him for 2 months, and that's been the history of this franchise, where we'll get guys that do very well, but not give them enough to continue to develop, and then wonder why they don't develop. And honestly, it sucks that it's happening now, because me, and I'm pretty sure other Hornets fans, felt like, maybe we're a couple of veteran pieces away from just trying. But to your point, and I've heard you say it before, this is something, what they're about to do now is something they should have did as soon as LaMelo Ball was the pick, they should have did what they're doing now, but they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, they went out the next week and got Gordon Hayward. Like that, which
knowing everything that just happened with him.
We have litigated and relitigated that so many times on this podcast over the years. But as far as like Smith goes, he shot the ball probably like unsustainably well from 3 when he was like getting some decent burn in the middle of the season. Then he kind of cooled off. Like you said, the roll was way up and down. I like Smith a lot as a prospect. I liked him as a prep. Obviously he dealt with injuries at Arkansas. I still think there's a chance there's something there. Like I haven't bailed on NSJ quite yet. And I should say, I mentioned LaMelo's salary number for next year. It's actually a little north of $35 million. And just as the Hornets are like contemplating some of these options, here's some numbers to remember. As of right now, from the way things stand, there are 14 guys under contract: Ball, Bertans, Williams, Miller, Martin, Micic, Richards, Trey Mann, Mark Williams, Seth Curry, Nick Smith Jr., Poku, Bryce McGowan's, JT Thor. They have a club option on Thor. Bryce McGowan's, there's an option on July 18th, after which he's fully guaranteed. There is an option on the 8th of July for Poku, fully guaranteed after that. We've talked about this sort of like early option date or early guarantee date with Seth Curry, which is June 27th, so like right around the draft, fully guaranteed. After that, only a $4 million salary. And then there's the Davis Bertans deal, which is fully guaranteed, I believe, after the 10th of next January, so 2025. So a little bit further off to make that. And so you have those 14 players. Obviously, you could move some of those guys pretty easily just because some of those numbers are you can just cut them loose or you can put them in trades or whatever. You've also got the number 6 pick coming in, which you're going to have a first year salary right around maybe $7.5 million. But without that, with just those 14 guys that I outlined, you'll notice no Miles Bridges in that. You're right about $119 million. The cap for next season set up at 141, or at least that's what it's projected to. Bridges, $15 million cap hold, and then you've got the 6th pick, right around $7.5 million in terms of first year salary. So they're gonna have to make some decisions. I think it would be interesting to see them operate as maybe as like a team with cap space that could maybe take on some contracts, but I'm not sure that's the route they're going to go. But sort of like you and I were outlining it, it's certainly worth kicking the tires on it.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, I am in favor of this team taking a patient approach with next season. And I should say, there have been a few people in the comments, including Deontay White, who mentioned, the need or the preference to see them sign some veterans. Like, I actually don't think that would be a terrible thing would be for them to get parts of their roster for it to get like a little bit older. You get some veterans in the door, but no one that's going to cause this team to I think spike in either direction from like a win-loss projection. You know what I mean? And then if you also get some of those guys, if you sign them to a shorter contract or something like that, you might be able to spin them into something else as a trade chip down the line too. So I wouldn't hate that approach either. My whole thing for them would be just to make sure that they retain that 2025 first round pick and they just take a little bit more patience building this thing up around guys like Miller and in Mark Williams, LaMelo Ball. And I'm hopeful to see those guys play more together next season and excited to see whoever with the number 6 pick will be that comes in the door. Darian, we're running up against it here. So any final thoughts on any of this stuff before we maybe sign off here for this week?
I have just 2 things. One, for all the roster spots that we showed, of those 14 guys, I only care about 7. There's only 7 of them I would be interested in keeping. And it's not that I want the others to go. Well, some of them I do, but it's not that I necessarily want them to go. It's just it wouldn't be the end of my days if they were to leave for whatever reason. Some like Miles Bridges, if 30 million is just steep for me. I see the value of him. I would like to keep him, but if he still wants 30 million, I just don't know. I don't know. I think Miles Bridges, his usage is, I don't think it's tapped out yet. I think his stat line may be tapped out, but his impact on the game, I think he has a lot to give the game. It's just $30 million is steep. And then that would obviously put us in a situation where we can't take on as many contracts. So it's just something to think about depending on how you see this team. If you want to try to see their max potential, then he might be someone that has to go. But really, I'm more so thinking about Bryce McGowan, JT Thor, Cody Martin, Micic, even just a couple of those guys that were kind of in the mid tier. It wouldn't matter to me if they were gone. And then lastly, about the veteran, I think that's a good point because if we look at OKC, they got Chris Paul because they thought Chris Paul's career was over. That's why they got Chris Paul. It was this is a good veteran guard for Shea, but we're not expecting anything of it.
They picked up some picks in that transaction too.
And their whole run is based off that one season where today I think they lost in 7 to the Rockets.
The Rockets in the bubble.
Their whole what they are now is based on that one season because you got one veteran who everybody thought his career was over, and you just went, like you said, got some picks and said, oh, well, we're not tanking, but we're also not trying to get in our own way. And it just gave them everything they need to do what they just did, which is, go to the second round in the playoffs. And if it wasn't playing for a very, you're playing Luka and then PJ Washington playing out of his mind, you would have been in the Western Conference Finals. So it's just, I do like the veteran approach. Obviously, I would like the picks to come with it, but I think that one thing with all the talk about bringing in so many young guys is that you don't want kind of what we're going through now, or maybe so in the past, of just having too many young players. If you're trying to evaluate talent, and I'm all for that, but if you're really just focused on getting assets and just building up your key guys, then I think that's where bringing in the veterans really helps, because Brandon Miller has someone to bounce ideas off. LaMelo Ball has someone to bounce off. They're not the guys, because if they bring in a bunch of young people,
well, some of this
LaMelo
could
Ball
also
and Brandon Miller are the veterans.
some of this could also depend on the coaching staff too. I mean,
That
like
too.
there are some teams that have had Orlando, Oklahoma City. I mean, they've got special players, you know, Banchero, Gilgeous Alexander, J-Dub, etc. But like those have been very young ecosystems, but like things are like very healthy there. And like
That too.
there's like good development, the team build is going well. So it's like you know, I know there are veteran, you know, Joe Ingles plays for the Magic. Like I know there's veterans and stuff like that, but it's like you can go the young route. Maybe there's a little bit more like downside risk. It's like you can do it though. It's not like you absolutely need to have veterans in to like, you know, help with the, you know, legitimize a rebuild or something like that. It can help. But a lot of that's going to be on the front office, the new coaching staff as well, like depending on which approach they're going to take. Last shot, I would say Miles Bridges is not a $30 million player, man. Like if that's what that guy wants, someone else, it's crazy. It's a crazy number. I mean, like, again, I've said my piece on Bridges too many times. Like, I don't think he should be in Charlotte still. He would, as far as just like his on-court production, he would need to be, things would have to change from him from like a winning player perspective for me to really buy into him being a $30 million player. I know the cap's going to go up. I know he's a talent. He's still young, whatever. But man, to bring that guy in with the baggage, and the inattention to detail on defense, everything else, I just, it's too much for me. So,
and I think his game can be fixed. Like it's not like he had.
I just don't care.
Right.
I just don't care. I just don't care.
And for me, I'm just not. I can't. I'm not a hoper. Like I can't sit here and hope that you will bring it together for 30 million.
Yeah,
that's kind of my. If he did it and we just had a bad season, cool. Here's your 30 million. But I can't hope that winning and then you having your money and then LaMelo Ball playing, that's going to make you better. I can't hope that for 30 million. For me.
Yeah, we've done I'm sure there's going to be plenty of time to do more. Always a delight to talk Miles Bridges. Always my favorite topic. I'm sure I'll have plenty of more time for that the rest of the summer. Thanks to all of you who joined us for another episode of BuzzBeat and those who listen to us ad-free and early through BuzzBeat Plus. Really appreciate all of you guys for chiming in. There were some really, I thought, pretty thoughtful comments throughout the show today, so really appreciate that. Lastly, make sure to go rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you missed any previous scouting episodes, we've done Steph Castle, Dalton Knecht, Ron Holland, Donovan Clingan. We've done a lot. We've probably done 10 different guys now at this point. So please go check those out. We will talk to you soon.